Okay, we are live. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday to those who are joining us live. We are also recording this, so happy whatever day it is to you if you're watching later. I am so excited to be moderating, hosting today's panel event all about empowering entrepreneurs, talking about the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program. So I am Fiona McEntee. I am the managing attorney of McEntee Law Group, which is an immigration law firm in Chicago. I have a personal connection to this whole thing because I am an immigrant myself. I came to the US as an international student from Ireland and have spent, almost 20 years working with other immigrants and a lot of international students on different immigration options. And yeah, this is something that is both a personal and professional passion of mine. So I'm delighted to be here today. I have an amazing panel here, a lot of people with a ton of experience in this area. And I will go ahead. I'll first introduce Steve from Global Detroit. Steve, would you mind just doing a brief introduction of yourself and your connection to the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program?
Sure. I'm the executive director at Global Detroit. We are a nonprofit economic development organization focused on immigrant inclusion as a strategy for economic growth. Our programs range from the Global EIR to working with micro entrepreneurs in low-income neighborhoods in Detroit and Hamtramck. And I've been sort of the lead to kind of come up with the Global EIR and get it funded and implemented. And I don't spend as much time running the program at Global Detroit, but I staff our national Global EIR national peer network work, which includes everybody on this call and many more folks who are either running Global EIR programs, interested in Global EIR programs, or just want to support the growth and success of Global EIR programs.
Great, thanks, Steve. And we'll get into, immigration is a world of acronyms with all these different, phrases and things. And we'll get into exactly what this all means and, who it helps. And we're just very lucky to have such a great panel of experts here today. Okay, so Priya, would you do a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Supriya Tamang, and I'm Program Training and Development Manager at Global Cleveland. We are a nonprofit economic development organization that provide resources and support to international newcomers in Northeast Ohio region. And we started the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program in 2022. And so far, we've been working through different ways to have entrepreneurs, international foreign entrepreneurs to come into the Northeast Ohio region and grow their business here.
Great. Thanks so much, Supriya. Aijan, you're up. Quick intro, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for organizing this panel, Fiona. My name is Aijan. I am with Global Detroit, and I work with the National Peer Network, and we're going to talk about it more in a bit. I'm also a law student at Northeastern University School of Law in Boston. And prior to Global Detroit and my journey at law school, I was with Venture Development Center at UMass Boston. It's a business incubator and was the first in the country to pilot the Global EIR program in 2014.
Yeah, and we're so delighted to have you share that experience. I think there's always a good time to talk about immigrants and immigration, but especially now, I think we're going to, really chat about the contributions that immigrant entrepreneurs and immigrant founders can bring to the US. I mean, it seems like to me in the years that I've been practicing, immigration, really wasn't at the forefront of the media or conversations back when I started practicing. But now, every day we hear about immigration and a lot of times we hear about things like the southern border and different types of immigration. And I think that, there are so many other parts of immigration that we just don't really get to hear about a lot. And this is why I am thrilled to be able to, share this part of immigration with everybody today so we can have a real open discussion about the types of programs that are available that not only help the immigrant founders, they also help their startups, the jobs that they can create within those communities, and also in turn the city and the state. And I think we have some people that can really speak to that experience here today. I noticed that somebody said they had issues connecting here in the chat. It looks like it's live on our end, but maybe Liz from our team can see and confirm that everything is okay, just to make sure that we are not speaking into the void, which I often do anyway. So I'm not sure that there would be much of a change from my daily things, but hopefully other people can see us. Maybe if you're watching, if you could just comment in to give that reassurance to us, that would be great. But I'll just forge ahead regardless. So okay, first things first. We've mentioned Global EIR, GEIR. I'll just throw this out. Maybe I'll start with Aijan. Would you explain to people what is Global EIR? What does this mean? When did it start? And that would just be a great place to start, I think, for people.
Yeah, sure, of course. In Massachusetts, we call the Global EIR or GIR program as a economic development program to attract international founders to launch and start high growth companies in Massachusetts. The program was actually created in 2014 by the state of Massachusetts with the support of local venture capitalists and immigration attorneys.
So sorry, Aijan, so 2014. So it's about 10 years old then since the program was initially created, right?
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like background of it was that Massachusetts has a lot of universities, and the state recognized how much international students are contributing to the local economy. And some of these students, they want to launch companies, but there was no visa solution for them, and a lot of them were leaving. So the state decided to step in and created this program for international founders, predominantly international students that are coming to the state of Massachusetts and graduating to launch high growth startup companies.
Yeah.
So we started with a pilot in 2014. There were 2 global EIRs in the program, and eventually we grew to at the end of 2020, we supported over 80 people with this program.
That's incredible. And so I think to kind of set the scene in terms of immigration, the reason this is such a big deal is, for many reasons, but a reason is that in the US, we are unfortunately stuck in about a 30-year immigration time warp. And what that means is that we really haven't seen any comprehensive immigration laws passed by Congress in over 30 years. And so even just think about how we're interacting today. We're on a platform, StreamYard, people are jumping in from LinkedIn, we're chatting to people from all over the place. That wasn't happening 30 years ago. And the way we work and the way, we do a lot of things has changed, but what has not changed are the immigration laws. And so one of the big gaps in the immigration system is that we don't have a startup visa for founders who are wanting to, let's say the likes of, Airbnb, when they started out, they get money from venture capitalists, they intend on growing and scaling. There's no, the immigration system wasn't really designed with that in mind. So often when we think of immigration, we think of this as a federal, at the federal level, because that's where the immigration law and the immigration policy comes from. But obviously Congress didn't update the immigration laws. We have some policy and stuff. So what this was utilizing the existing laws, which is the H-1B visa, and thinking about how we could utilize some of, just looking at the cap exempt visa in a different way. Steve, are you able to maybe talk a little bit about, how the H-1B visa is utilized in like a global EIR program?
I can, and clearly you and Aijan are more expert than I, but universities and healthcare and some other research organizations are able to use the H-1B visa for their employees in what is called an uncapped H-1B visa. So everybody's very familiar with the H-1B lottery that happens early April every year. Now I know that you put in your application before then, and we've had some changes to how that works. But as you know, there's in a good year, a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to win the H-1B lottery. This is totally different. So it's the same criteria. It's a specialty occupation. You need to have at least a bachelor's degree. Often you need to have a STEM degree or a certain kind of job. So usually like a job to do communications, for example, would not hit the H-1B criteria, but a job to do maybe some IT coding or engineering, that would hit a specialty occupation. And so the fundamental premise behind the Global EIR program is that we are linking startup founders who are immigrants who need a visa to be able to launch their companies in the US or further their companies in the US with a part-time university position. And that can be as little as 8 hours a week. So Global Detroit has now done this with 5 or 6 universities across Michigan. We started with the
That's
University
incredible.
of Michigan. And we started in the Economic Growth Institute, which is a part of the university that has a kind of a business line of coaching other startups. So our founders worked part-time, usually like 10 hours a week or 8 hours a week. And they led student teams to do market research for other startup companies. And they were working with students on campus to help give them experience of working in the startup economy. And they got paid you have to get a prevailing wage. So, often that's $30, $40 an hour for that type of job. And that gives you a pathway to really focus on your startup. So typically in these global EIR programs, the way I've described it, and you'll hear that Global Cleveland and UMass Boston run slightly different versions, but this is the way I'm explaining it is the kind of easiest to understand. The founder, in addition to their part-time job, will then go get a concurrent H-1B through their company, and that enables them to work on their company while they have the first H-1B. If they lose their university job, that concurrent one is not a pathway for them to move to their startup full-time. It only exists concurrent to that first H-1B that they get, but they're typically in a global EIR program. I mean, we've had as little as 6 weeks, which is truly extraordinary. It's typically a year, can be 18 months, some have been 2 years. And when their startup continues to progress, they can access other visa pathways for entrepreneurs that you specialize in, Fiona, that include O1, which is a person of extraordinary talent, EB2 national waivers, now the entrepreneurial parole rule, which also the time that it might take to get that, they can exist on their university job while they're waiting for that time. So there's a lot of pathways to longer term status. We've also had founders get married. We've had founders who have won the H-1B lottery through their companies, just a myriad of exit solutions. But it's that early stage uncapped H-1B that is so important to help the startup.
Yeah, and I think that's key. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, it's the immigration solution that might work for you now is likely not going to be your forever option, right? But is it good enough for now? And can it get you to maybe whatever that next option is? So just to totally clarify again, this is utilizing the H-1B visa where you're able to get a first H-1B through a CAP exempt organization. In some cases, it's a university that is exempt from this annual lottery, and they will sponsor a part-time H-1B for a startup founder where they'll provide services to the university, and depending on what their background is, for maybe 8 hours per week, and they'll get paid for it. And then because they have that approval, they're able to file a second H-1B visa for their own startup and hold the two of them concurrently. Now, ordinarily, this second H-1B visa would have to go through the lottery, and they'd be in that 1 in 3, as Steve mentioned. But because of this kind of anchor CAP exempt institution, they're able to file for their second concurrent H-1B. And it's a really fantastic solution for people who maybe need some time before they get an O1 or before, they may get selected in the lottery. Supriya, would you share a little bit about the experience of Global Cleveland in working with the Global EIR program?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started it, it was in 2022. Before that, we had reached out to, Craig Montori, who is one of the co-founders and co-executive for this Global EIR program. And we were trying to figure out, like, how do we run this program in Cleveland and then have it set up at, like, Cleveland, maybe at the university or somewhere. So while figuring that out, we were able to find a way where we could actually house entrepreneurs at Global Cleveland. And this is a completely different model from Massachusetts or Global Detroit. And we were able to have an affiliation with our local university at that time, Cleveland State University, which is why we were considered a cap exempt organization ourselves. So we were housing all the entrepreneurs at our organization and do the same process, what Steve had explained, like the same cap exempt H-1B and the concurrent H-1B.
That's great. So just to kind of highlight the different ways that this can work, there needs to be this anchor cap exempt organization as the sponsor. In Massachusetts and in Global Detroit, that sponsor is the university that is cap exempt. In Global Cleveland's situation, it is actually Global Cleveland that is leveraging its nonprofit status and its affiliation with universities, and that makes Global Cleveland exempt from the H-1B lottery. And again, it's still the same process where there's a cap exempt filed by the institution, and then the second concurrent like option that's filed by the startup. And I think, I know initially there was some maybe reluctance is the word that I would use when you're doing something new in immigration. I think there is a concern that are these cases going to get approved? Is this going to work? But Aijan, I mean, there was tremendous success, right, in Massachusetts from this program.
Yes, that's right. As of 2020, at the end of 2020, when I was leaving Venture Development Center, we had 81 approved H-1B visas, and these are associated with people, right? So 81 people.
Yeah.
100% success rate. All of the visas were approved. 2,750 job opportunities were created.
What? Wow.
Yeah, isn't it
3,000 jobs created from this? Oh my gosh.
And over $1 billion were generated in funding by these startups, venture funding, seed funding, grants like NSF grants, SBIR grants, STTR grants. 59% of the companies launched were still active in 2020. And all these great entrepreneurs, they participated in numerous classes, offered a lot of internships, capstone projects, and became fabric of the UMass Boston community.
That is incredible. And this is why I'm so determined to continue to have these conversations, specifically being in Chicago, state of Illinois. I want people in our state to hear about this and to learn about what this might look like in our state. So just to recap, the startups that came out of this program in Massachusetts raised $1 billion in funding. They had 81 of these cap exempt H-1B visas approved and created 2,750 jobs from this program, which is tremendous success. So I think whatever reservations people or other states might have had in the past should hopefully be eclipsed by the tremendous success of the program. And Steve, we've obviously kind of been working, myself and Liz from our team have been like Global Detroit adjacent, Global EIR adjacent for a while. But in your quest to establish the program in Global Detroit, you came up against some kind of hurdles and roadblocks, right? In terms of like, how do you do this, right? And from that, I'll let you kind of talk about that and what the end solution ended up being in terms of the network.
Yeah, Well, first of all, for us to launch, we launched in 2019. It took a couple years after
Mhm.
meeting Craig Montouri, and we certainly were tracking because we have run national networks. We run the Welcoming Economy Network for Welcoming America. We've run other networks that connect different cities that are doing immigrant inclusive economic development activities around micro entrepreneurship, around skilled immigrant integration, international student retention, and we'll get to this program. But so we were aware of the program. The National Global EIR nonprofit, which is not operating anymore, came to us and said they were interested in Detroit. And the very first barrier for us, obviously, we needed a university partner. That was not difficult for us. We had already been doing international student retention work with over a half dozen great universities, research universities, and so we had great partnerships. But we needed funding. We needed to be able to pay those part-time job the salaries, and we needed to be able to pay for the visa sponsorship and the legal work and the visa that the university was going to hold. All told, you could do those calculations. It's no more than 50 and probably closer to $25,000 per founder per year to support somebody. And we're a nonprofit C3, and we've always worked with foundations. And so eventually, thanks to the largesse of the William Davidson Foundation, which is a foundation committed to Southeast Michigan that's interested in entrepreneurship and transformative projects, we were able to get a 3-year operating grant for the program, and that was continued. I will say that at the early days, we had challenges finding those founders. But once we started to have some success, we've not invested that much time in finding them. We've had a steady pipeline of founders. And the other challenge for us has been during the model that I mentioned, we have always had a choke point on the universities and how many founders they're willing to place at a single time, which is why when Supriya was able to build this model at Global Cleveland with her partnership with Cleveland State and Case Western, we emulated that model, and we now have a hybrid. We just have our first direct hire. So we both continue to place at universities, and that is our first option. But now we have a safety valve that if we can't place somebody with one of our many university partners, we can hire them directly and submit an H-1B. So we had been doing the program for 2 or 3 years. We stayed very connected to Craig Montouri and the Global EIR team. We had them come to one of our Welcoming Economies conferences and present to other cities. In fact, that may have been before Cleveland launched, and that may be one of the ways they connected with them. And we kept asking for other things, like we would like more manuals, like more information. We'd like to meet other Global EIR programs to learn from them. And I have found that when you're pioneering these kinds of unique economic development strategies, that relationship with other peer organizations from other cities is the most valuable learning and teaching tool. We have gotten so many ideas from our partners at Global Cleveland, St. Louis Mosaic, and Welcoming Center for New Pennsylvanians, and all across the country. So when there was an opportunity in 2021, the Kauffman Foundation had a grant to do advocacy work, actually, and they had they called New American Business Plan, and it was a number of public policies supporting entrepreneurship in this country that they wanted to see. One of those policies was a startup visa. And so we encouraged Global EIR to apply for that. They didn't do that, and they said, you should apply. And our pitch was, I think for us to be successful, to advocate for the startup visa, we have to get out of just Silicon Valley, and I would say Boston and Seattle, and it needs to be Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit and Iowa and Missouri that are also saying we need a startup visa. And so we believe that building a connection between these global EIR programs is going to build kind of a network and a family. And I think we've done that over the last 3 years. There are now over 200 individual emails on our email list. And if you come to one of our monthly meetings, which are pretty much open to anybody that's interested in this program, we tackle different topics that are important to global EIR. Like at our last meeting, we spent an hour just talking about how do you find immigrant founders for your program as you're ready to launch. We go through those kinds of topics. And Aijan has written some beautiful guides to help organizations organizations understand how to implement this. And we have usually on a monthly basis, 30, sometimes as many as 40 people on these calls. And now it's a network that is ready to advocate for a startup visa, is ready to make comments on H-1B rule changes that impact entrepreneurs, is ready to work with USCIS on different ways in which immigrant founders can access visas to make America, the startup nation that we want.
Yeah. And I think, that's just the power in that, like, resource sharing and that solidarity. I think it's interesting to learn about what Supriya and Global Cleveland have done, and then how Global Detroit were able to kind of take some tips from that model and adapt it as well. And it's like, I think it kind of stems from this idea of, not everybody needs to reinvent the wheel like all the time. And if there's some of this institutional knowledge that we have, how can we figure out how to share this? And we'll definitely share the link for people to join the newsletter list that you have for the peer network, and information on those calls as well. Steve, I'm conscious of the fact that you might need to go at some point. We're going to hopefully stay on till the top of the hour, but whenever you need to leave, Steve, I would love for you to share, and then I'll get to other questions to Supriya and Aijan. But can you share, Steve, some of the highlights from other states, how maybe some of the state governments are supporting this program across the US based on kind of the success that we've seen in other states so far?
Yeah, and then I just want to make some closing remarks. This is great that you're having this call at this time, Fiona, and talking to folks in Chicago about what might be possible for Chicago, because in 2021, when we got together as coming out of the pandemic, I think we all wore masks and everything at that first convening in Boston, or maybe it was April 2022. I don't remember the exact date, but at that time, Global Cleveland had just accepted, I think, its first entrepreneur. We were placing 3 or 4 a year. UMass Boston was down to just a half dozen or so a year. And then the other operating program was at Babson College, and they had kind of shut down during the pandemic, and they didn't have any new founders, and that was it. So we were really almost down to like 3 programs. Where we are today is that, at Global Detroit, we've expanded to a whole bunch of new universities. And we've seen a program launch through our network. Somebody who came to that first convening in Washington, D.C., in George Washington. I believe Pittsburgh has got their first founder in place. And then we were able, as part of a larger talent initiative in Michigan, a global talent initiative that includes a whole bunch of other programs, but to get $1 million appropriated in the fiscal year 23 and the fiscal year 24 budgets for Global EIR, which allowed us to expand across the state to include Michigan Tech in our Upper Peninsula, include Grand Valley State. We're now about to add Michigan State. So we'll be operating at about 6 Michigan universities. That state appropriation, which a long time ago Massachusetts had done, I think even Colorado had done back in the mid-2010s, I think it helped inspire a $2 million appropriation in California, which happened last year, that is just about to launch that program in California in the University of California system. If you know, there's 10 schools in the UC system. Mm-hmm. And then just this year, and during budget time, state budget time, New York State passed a $4 million Global EIR line to their Economic Development Office. New Jersey passed, I want to say, a $200,000 or $300,000 line to their Department of State. State of Washington passed $300,000 in their budget. And then even Massachusetts came back to the public budgeting and just awarded $200,000 to Mass Ventures, their state startup entity, to really help this program penetrate in central Massachusetts, not just in the Boston area. So we've seen now 6 states are funding Global EIR programs, and there's just a lot of interest in the program. The last thing I want to say before I close, and just thank you for having us, and it's always great to be with Aijan and Supriya and yourself, is that our success numbers, we started in 2017, and we do run the national network. We, in the first 5 years, we started in 2019, sorry, we only had 12 founders, right, in those first 5 years. Those founders, though, did raise $28 million in startup capital. They did create 174 jobs, which is a great return on investment for the amount of money we've put in. And we've already placed 2 more and have 4 that have been approved, and we're just placing them at universities, and we're funded to do 10 a year. So while we're not all going to be, we don't have the startup ecosystem of a Boston and what the Venture Development Center. Again, this could be broken down to as much as $25,000 to $50,000 per founder per year in costs. And if you look at the job creation for us in 5 years, 175 jobs for 12 founders. I mean, the cost per job, and these are tech jobs, and it's not just the job creation. Like we have a founder who is totally revolutionizing how urban farmers in Detroit are able to get their produce to consumers, helping solve for food deserts in our city where we don't have fresh groceries in many communities. We have a founder who is pioneering electric vehicles in the off-road vehicle space.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And we have frankly, our last founder to exit was up in the Upper Peninsula, a woman from Saudi Arabia, PhD in molecular biology, and she has early detection of microorganisms in fresh water and lakes and rivers, which is so important to Michigan's future, right? To protect our fresh water. You can't get a more important issue in Michigan. So these aren't just jobs and companies. These are companies that are critical to our economy and to solving public problems. And only startups in the innovation economy can bring that kind of change and that kind of public impact to our community. So I really think there's something special here. And we look forward to celebrating the Chicago launch in the coming year or years. And thanks for having me today.
Yeah, Steve, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, I think needs to be, shouted from the rooftops, right? It's not only, we can look at some of these stats and we can, it is great that they've raised funding and created jobs, but when you think about the impact that these companies are having to the local people living in these states, right? By like bringing, urban farmers food to a food desert. I mean, that's incredible. Steve, whenever you need to go, it's totally fine. Obviously you can stay till, we would love to have you till whenever, but we understand if you do need to go. And Supriya, are you able to share maybe, thanks Steve, some info of like some of the founders that you have either met and are going through the program or have already gone through the program, and maybe a bit about how you find those founders or how they find Global Cleveland?
Yeah, before I talk about that, I want to say like how the network and the resources that are in the network have helped us, build the GIR program because of, connection with Ijan and connection with Steve. We were able to like get the resources about like, what kind of job descriptions are we putting in, what kind of like, materials we would be needing. And I think that helped us a lot for our first founder. And and we at Global Cleveland see it as an economic development tool, as everyone else is looking at GIR to bring in, the talent and to the region, not just attracting but retaining them for a long time. And to talk about entrepreneurs that we've had, we have had like one entrepreneur that is very close to exiting the program. And we are working on our second entrepreneur currently through their H-1B process. And the first entrepreneur that we worked with has been a great example for the GIR itself, I would say, because they were able to, continue their business through this program. Otherwise, they would be out of status if it were not for the GIR. And now that they were able to raise $1 million, were able to, employ 20, created like 20 jobs through his company, Aaron George, and then looking at like all this benefits that we are getting from the entrepreneur, we think like investing in the entrepreneur through this program is super beneficial for our economic growth as well. And we, even though we have had like 2 entrepreneurs that are actually in the program or in the process of getting into the program, we've met with more than 30 entrepreneurs in the last 2 years. everyone
Great.
interested about the program. I think it was the challenge was to find the balance between funding and the entrepreneur flow into the program. Sometimes you have entrepreneurs, but you don't have funding, and sometimes you have funding, but you don't have entrepreneurs. However, at the same time, it is also to understand the right stage of the entrepreneurs to be in the program.
Yeah.
Some of them are with just the idea and have not worked through like the initial stages, as we are looking for high growth startups in the
Mhm.
program. So, some of them are early stage and is looking for opportunity to grow their business, and we let them know there is such program called Global Entrepreneur in Residence if you are looking to grow your business in Northeast Ohio. So please keep this in mind, and if you need anything, reach out to us. If you need to connect with mentors, if you need to connect with any kind of resources in Northeast Ohio, then we would be happy to help them connect through that. um, and we also encourage the entrepreneurs to utilize their optional practical training or the STEM OPT if needed, because that
Yeah.
would help them grow their business before coming into the GIR program. But some of them may not have that opportunity of having OPT or STEM OPT. And for them, like, which is our second entrepreneur, it was her uh, second master, so did not have that opportunity or option of getting into OPT. So we filed for her H-1B, and we're still in the process. So on working on documents. So hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks of time, we will get our second entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's incredible to just hear some of these stories and to hear how many people you're meeting with, like 30 founders or so, and maybe some of them are just, it's a little early for them, but your program is on their radar, and then at some point when there's a good match, that you've done a lot of the foundational work to like have the program in place. And Aijan, yes, I definitely wanted to ask you about the peer network and the resources that you have put together. So Steve, I think, mentioned this when as part of like the funding that Global Detroit received. Some of it was to go towards advocacy for a startup visa. And then the second part of it was to build out this like national peer network. And I think it stemmed from obviously seeing the success in Massachusetts and then seeing Global Detroit, set up the program, maybe not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but just kind of like set it up, from, internally. And then how did you start working with Global Detroit? Because you have all this institutional knowledge from years in Massachusetts. And when I heard that you were Joy, we were also excited to learn that someone who, had such experience with what was like a unicorn kind of program that we heard about, but no one had ever like really worked on. How did you come to start working with Global Detroit on this?
As Steve mentioned, the peer network started in 2021, I believe, with the help of Kaufman Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Steve was sort of like reaching out to all the active programs around the country to learn more about the program, because as he mentioned, they were sort of like looking into the program and thinking of how to start it, how to execute it. So he was reaching out to folks around the country to learn from their experience. So that's kind of how I got to know Steve. And then later on, when I was leaving Venture Development Center, um, you know, for the law school related reasons, Steve sort of mentioned that they're thinking of launching the peer network, and I'm a big supporter of the program. It's a no-brainer to me. And I wanted to continue working on it, and it was such a great opportunity for me to get involved and share my knowledge through this
Yeah.
network and help organizations like Global Cleveland to launch the program and not reinvent the wheel, if you will, because we've done a lot of work at the Venture Development Center, and we wanted to share because we want organizations around the country to implement the program and see how great it is, and kind of have such a great experience like we did.
Yeah. and it's working. You know, when I met Steve through an event in COVID online. Of course, everything was online, and it was about you know, kind of immigration reforms, policy kind of stuff. And I mean, at the time, I think it was before the launch of the network, and it's just been incredible to see how it's grown and grown and grown. And like before Steve jumped off, like some of those like stats that he shared about not only like successful implementation and roll out in other states, but also getting the state funding, like having states recognize the importance of this, you know, is just a tremendous, I think, sign of how successful the network is, because it's getting people together on a regular basis, and the Zooms are great. They're really, I think, approachable, and people can jump on if they have, you know, barely even heard of the program, and they can just like sit and observe and kind of hear what, you know, what is the topic of the month. And I think Steve mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that the most recent topic was how to source like immigrant founders. I spoke before about the concurrent H1B filing, like what that looks like in terms of the startup filing their second H1B once they get the first one approved. So you get to really learn and hear from people who are like in the process of like going through this. And then Aijan, you've created this like database of resources, right? In terms of, as Supriya mentioned, you know, what does a job description, you know, look like for a founder in the program, both maybe more, I'd say, in the terms of like working with the CAP exempt institution, like what job title should they have? What kind of stock code are we looking at in terms of like H1B classification? Perhaps, you know, something about affiliation, right? So Supriya, you, Global Cleveland, created an affiliation with the universities and was able to, through that, you know, qualify as a CAP exempt employer in its own right. So kind of having some of these resources, I think, is really key. And for me to see, you know, it's been really amazing to see how much this program has grown, and just to see this opportunity that would really not be there for most founders, right? If this is the option, it is, of course, there's work involved, and there's, you know, steps that you need to take to get like the relationship with the CAP exempt employer. And of course, it's not for everybody, but for those who it works for, it can just be a tremendous like benefit. So Supriya, one question I was wondering, if there's somebody watching today, either from Illinois, hopefully, hi, you are a neighbor, but if there's someone watching from a state that doesn't yet have one of these programs, what do you think are like this? What should they do? What are the key steps that you would recommend that somebody do when they're thinking about launching a program in their state?
Yeah, I think the relationship, you know, with whether it's with the city or like, you know, the local governments, or if it's with the universities, I think those are really key to understand. Like, you know, if you have those relationship with these key institutions or stakeholders, that helps you build the program quite easily, because that back and forth, you know, understanding of what is needed in the region, and then how we can start it. If there is a partner that understands where you're coming from, what your vision is in terms of bringing this program into the region, I think that helps a lot. Starting that conversation early, having that conversation every single time, you know, to talk about this is what I see as an economic development tool and can bring a lot, providing all the success stories that other places have. I know people talk about Massachusetts and it has a huge ecosystem, but to talk about Detroit and Cleveland are being able to do that and retain talent, I think that helps a lot. And the other part is like, you know, the finding entrepreneurs, like to understand these universities have a lot of international students coming, and many of them do have that interest in starting that to start a business and to grow a business in the US. So finding like, you know, how many people are interested in starting a business, or and to be honest, like I think there are already entrepreneurs doing that and still trying to find ways to continue their business um, in the US currently. So, looking at different pitch competitions, understanding how many international founders are there, looking into different accelerator programs and entrepreneurship programs throughout the city or like the county, and understanding, what is the population of international founders that are in the region. And then the need of GIR is, I would say, definitely a very prominent one, uh, of considering the entrepreneurs that I have met throughout the years. And it's not just within the Northeast Ohio for us. Like, there are entrepreneurs who reached out from different states, because our current second entrepreneur did come from Missouri. So that is why, like, to help them understand that you are actually bringing people in, retaining them,
Yeah.
bringing innovation into the economy, bringing capital into the economy. And many of these entrepreneurs do get into national, programs, and those capital come and flow into the economy of that particular region where they
Yeah.
are at. So
I mean,
I
it's
think
a no-brainer, I think. When you explain it, when you talk about it in that way, right? There's an entrepreneur or a would-be entrepreneur who has, either an early stage business or an idea for a business, and they want to move to Cleveland or Ohio, and they want to have an opportunity to grow their business and to see what they can do if just given the opportunity. And we've seen what people can do if they're given access to these things. And people are not looking for handouts for things. They just want an opportunity to legitimately have a chance at growing their business, and to talk about their shot at the American dream. And why wouldn't we support them in this? Because it's ultimately benefiting all of us as well. But I think that that's interesting to note, that it can become, you can act as a magnet for people who want to come to your city and state from elsewhere because of offering one of these programs.
Yeah.
Jan, did you see any entrepreneurs move from overseas into Massachusetts or into Global Detroit, or in your experience, were most people already in the US on something else? I know I've met entrepreneurs through this network that moved from overseas on foot of one of these programs, but I just would be curious to hear if there was anybody that you can think of that did that.
I would say at the Venture Development Center, we had both. We had, international students graduating from the universities here in the United States, but we also had some folks coming, from overseas, from Europe, from India, all over the world, I would say. But one thing we would look at is for them to have some sort of like connection to the US. Maybe, they're expanding to US market. Maybe they were accepted by a Y Combinator and they want to come to Y Combinator. Maybe they came here as a visiting professor or visiting researcher, and as a result of that work, a startup, or an idea for the startup or some sort of technology came to be. So we would look at this, we would look at the connection to the US. But again, this is more geared towards Massachusetts, and it's not a requirement. Many organizations run the program in their own ways. And you were asking Supriya about if you're launching the program, what you should think about. And I would always advise to think of to kind of step back and look at the innovation ecosystem of your region, right? And how the program fits into that, and do you want the program to be part of that? And I think the more synergies you create, the more successful program it's going to be.
Yeah. And like the wheels are turning in my mind. I'm like, oh, thinking about like the partners here that we could, talk to in Chicago, in Illinois. Because I think that, for us, again, I'm biased being here, but like it is a city that is ripe and a state that is ripe for one of these programs, because Supriya, you mentioned international students. I mean, again, I'm a little biased because this is my journey started in that way, but we have so many universities here that have a huge international student population. And I think what people need to think about is, you know, the person who comes to the US as an international student has already shown such determination and such drive, because it's not an easy thing to get from wherever you are to study in the US, right? That is the road less traveled. The majority of people outside the US don't end up here as international students. So you're dealing with a population that has, I think, shown a lot already. And then within that group, the sub part of those international students who then decide, I want to, you know, do something even more difficult, like run my own startup. That's also not exactly an easy thing to do. So you're dealing with, I think, a group of people that are very determined, smart, and passionate, and you know, it kind of sets a good stage for this program. And I think that there's absolutely ways, when I just think of all the universities and the different, and Ajan, you mentioned the ecosystem, like here in Chicago, we do have a lot of like incubators, accelerators. Our office is in a place called 2112, which is a big music and entertainment and a creative like arts ecosystem. But we also have 1871, which is like a tech incubator. There's just a lot of other support, because I mean, obviously the program provides the immigration support and the immigration pathway for people, but that's not really where the road ends for people, right, Supriya? Like you mentioned, like some other resources like that you would provide to some of these founders. Could you talk a little bit about what other kind of doors you might be able to open for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also resonate to this because I also came as an international student, and to understand like all the difficulties of like, to find a job or to start a business. Like it's both risk and an opportunity for an international student to like, go into founding a business. And so, one of the process of like GIR is, this is a platform for them to grow their business, have their presence in the community, so that they can move into their O1 or EB1 or EB2, whatever the next path is. And for us, we are trying to provide them as many resources in terms of like, if they need a mentor, then we are trying to find a mentor for them in the same field, so that they can connect with them and figure out ways like, how to now that they have a business, like how to grow their business furthermore, scaling their business. And another part of it is technical supports, like some of the universities or like programs, like, well, one of the organizations called Jumpstart, who's one of our partners, also funding our tech entrepreneurs, is, they have this huge resource for all the entrepreneurs and business owners. And that's something like we provide them, saying like, this is our partner and has been supporting entrepreneurs in the region for a long time. So here are some of the programs that you could go through, and eventually probably get some seed money, or some money for your business if you go through this particular accelerator program they have. And yeah, similarly connecting them with any venture capitals or like funders that we know of, or like any loan associations that is not a traditional funding that many of the entrepreneurs are actually looking for. And it's very difficult for many international entrepreneurs to find funding because of their status and not their uncertainty. And if they are in GIR program, then they at least have some certainty. Okay, I'll be in this position for this many time, and I have a pathway to go into a different visa after this. So that kind of gives them a little bit of assurance in terms of not just for them, but also for the funders understanding, oh, okay, this person has this status now, and I think we should be able to fund them more. So that also provides them, opportunities to get more funding for their business as well. And the another part of it is like we try to connect them with the media as well. The newspaper, or it could be like a channel or something, so that they can build their public image in the
Mm.
Northeast Ohio, so that they are connecting with the community. We also encourage them to participate as a mentor or a judge in different pitch competitions, because eventually that would be needed in their further visa pathways.
Mm. Oh, I love to hear that, especially the media piece, because I mean, all of it, but just on that particular piece alone, I think the media it's not just my thought, it's oversaturated by bad, inaccurate stuff about immigrants.
Mhm.
And there is way more of this other positive stuff that's happening that just does not really get the airtime that it should. And I love that there is an effort made to share some of these stories, because it can really like help to change the narrative, because you want people to, when they think about immigration, that they're able to also picture like the immigrant founder who's helping to solve the food desert in Michigan, and you want them to think about like some of the other entrepreneurs that we've discussed here today. So that is like, I think, a huge piece, and getting funding and just getting all those resources, because ultimately like we all want these entrepreneurs to succeed, and they need things
Mhm.
beyond immigration support, right? And that's what I do as an immigration lawyer. I'm like, okay, if you need an intro to a customer in construction or retail, let me see if there's anyone that I can help introduce you to, because ultimately that's, I think, the holistic support that these entrepreneurs need. Especially for someone who didn't grow up in the US, you're not going to have that deep of a network that other people will have, and I think that that's a great way to really give them these additional ways to like help themselves. Aijan, before we wrap up, are there any like final thoughts that you would like to share? And Supriya, I'll let you have a final word as well. I'm so grateful to you both and to Steve for being here, for taking the time out of your really busy weeks and really busy days to be here. So thank you. And I'll just let you, if you wouldn't mind, sharing some final thoughts on today's chat.
Well, first of all, thank you, Fiona, for organizing this panel. Always great, to be part of the Global EIR cause, and spreading the goodwill of the program, if you will. Um, my I guess, last thoughts and recommendation is, if you're interested about the program, feel free to reach out to any of us. We are happy to talk about the program, big overview, or go into detail, whatever you want. Um, and I would say check out the National Peer Network, the I think the website. If you go to the Global Detroit's website, it should be there. And yeah, if you have any questions and want to learn more, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect.
Great. Thank you for sharing your immense knowledge and expertise with us both today and everything to date. And you're just so generous with your time and your expertise. Supriya, final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be in this panel. I know like we started in 2022, but I think I've learned so much over the past few years. It was me learning about the program while running the program. So that helped me get to know about the program a lot. And if any kind of information about our model or about the program in general, or to learn about like what Cleveland is doing, I'm happy to connect with anyone and share this information. And I'm also a big supporter of this program. So always happy to, be part of any ways that we can promote this program in Illinois.
Great. And what's going on? You have a busy week ahead in Global Cleveland. What's going on there?
Yes, so we have officially started our Welcoming Week 2024. I am currently at the Cuyahoga County Welcome Center right now, and there's a kickoff party going on outside
Oh,
with a lot of people, and we have plenty of events next week. We have International Job and Resource Fair, Sister City Flag Celebration. We have like volunteering opportunities for a lot of people. So there's plenty of things going on. So if anyone from Cleveland or Cuyahoga County tuning in, please feel free to come to any of these events.
oh, what a great way to end. I think we always celebrate immigrants here in our firm and in our family and in our communities, and it's just so nice to be surrounded with, by other people who also share, our love of immigrants. And thank you both for the work that you do that helps make this country a more welcoming place for all. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I look forward to working with you on more of these programs, hopefully one in Illinois soon. So thank you everyone for tuning in as well. Hope everybody has a lovely weekend. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye everyone. Thank you.